In an earlier movie, we saw that the New Document dialog box lets you set your margins and column guides. But what if you change your mind later, and the file's already created? Or what if you want different margins in different parts of your document? No problem. That's where the Margins and Columns feature comes in. It's here under the Layout menu. But before you choose this feature, you need to tell InDesign which pages you want to affect. Right now, by glancing in the lower left corner of the document window, I can see that this page on the left is page 24, so the one on the right is page 25. But that's not necessarily the pages that are selected. To see which pages are selected, I need to go to the Pages panel. I'll open the Pages panel at the top of the dock here, and I can see that pages 20 and 21 are selected. I can tell that because those are the ones that are highlighted. So if I go to Margins and Columns right now, it will affect the selected pages, 20 and 21, not the ones I'm looking at. So you do have to be a little bit careful here. To affect the pages that I'm looking at, I need to select them. If I click on page 24 here in the Pages panel, it's selected, but page 25 is not. I could shift-click on the second one, but I'm going to just click on these numbers underneath the spread. That's a little shortcut for selecting all the pages on the spread. Now I'm going to go back to the Layout menu and choose Margins and Columns. It's always a good idea to turn on the Preview checkbox in this dialog box. That way you can see what you're doing while you're working before you click OK. Now I'd like to change the bottom margin. But before I do that, I want to make sure that this icon here, this little chain icon, is broken, unlinked. If this button is turned on, if it's selected, then any change I make will affect all the fields in this section of the dialog box, and I don't want that. I only want to change the bottom margin, right here. I'm going to change it to 80 points. Now, InDesign only updates when I leave this field, so I'll press the Tab key to jump to the next item, and we can see that because the Preview checkbox is turned on, the margins moved. You can see before and after by turning on and off the checkbox. That was before, and now that's after. Now, obviously, this only changed the margins. It did not affect the objects on the page. If I want to affect the objects on the page, then I need to turn on this Enable Layout Adjustment checkbox. That is the on-off switch for move my objects or don't move my objects. Let's see the difference. I'll turn it off, and then I'll set my bottom margin back to the way it was, 60 points. I'll hit Tab to make sure it takes effect. Now I'm going to turn on Enable Layout Adjustment, set my bottom margin to 80 points again, and hit Tab. See the difference? Before and after. You can see that this text frame and this image over here both moved. But this image of this guy sitting on the sofa did not move. What's the difference? Well, Layout Adjustment works by looking at any objects that are touching guides that move. It has to be touching a guide, or very, very close to a guide, and then it will move. This text frame and this image over here were both touching the bottom margin. That's kind of like a guide. So when they moved, those frames resized. But this image over here was not touching any guide, so it stayed where it was. As you can tell, Layout Adjustment is a great way to move a lot of objects on your page quickly. So perhaps you're changing your page size or your margins across an entire book. Layout Adjustment may be just the ticket for you. However, with that power comes great responsibility. Here's what I mean. Sometimes Layout Adjustment can really mess up your page a lot. For example, look what happens if I change the number of columns to 2. Wow, that is not what I wanted, and it's certainly not what I expected. It added the second columns on this spread, but it moved a lot of these objects around and it changed the numbers of columns in the text frames. I don't know what it did or why it did it, but I don't like it. So I'm going to click Cancel to go back to the way it was. So we've seen how we can change the margins and columns on a single spread, but what if we want to change them for all the pages at the same time? No problem. There's two options. First, I could select all the pages in my Pages panel. I could click on the bottom spread and then shift-click on the first spread. That selects all of the spreads. Or, even faster, we can use master pages. Now, I'm going to be talking about master pages in the next chapter, but for now, suffice it to say that all of these pages in the Pages panel are all based on a master page, which lives up here at the top of the Pages panel. So if I click that master page once, it selects it. Now, if I go to the Layout menu and choose Margins and Columns, any change I make will affect the master page, which will in turn affect all the pages that are based on that master. In other words, all the pages in this document. Once again, I'll turn on Enable Layout Adjustment, change the bottom margin, and click OK. It changed every page in this document that's based on that master, not just the ones that I'm looking at. Now remember, these margin guides are just that. They're just guidelines for where you might put objects. There's other kinds of guides in InDesign too, called page guides, and that's what we'll talk about in the next movie.